Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for this very important release of another report which shows that 3 days of furlough is far too much. It not only harms working people, their families, but the policy is also hurting our economy in very significant ways. I'm Steinberg. I'm not only the pro tem of the Senate, but I also happen to be the state senator that represents Sacramento, which is the home, of course, to the vast majority of hardworking state workers. The report you are about to hear about is yet another account of why Governor Schwarzenegger should honor the collectively bargained agreement he made with SEIU Local 1000, in which they agreed, as part of the necessary sacrifice in these difficult economic times, to one furlough day. This was bargained, it was agreed to, and it ought to be the policy here of the state of California. The report from the UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education and the numbers it collects show how state workers are being unfairly hit in an already tough economic time. The furlough policy, done by executive order and being challenged in court, was not well thought out and not implemented in an effective way. I recently asked the Senate Office of Research to examine the furlough impact on Metro Sacramento, and though they are continuing to compile their research, the evidence is stark. 3 monthly furlough days have been estimated to cost Sacramento County alone around $286 million a year in lost economic activity. Corresponding job loss with the furloughs have been estimated to cost the local economy more than 2,000 jobs, including more than 500 jobs in the retail and wholesale trade sectors, more than 300 jobs in health services, more than 300 jobs in food services, more than 200 jobs in financial underwriting, insurance, legal, accounting, and real estate services. Just yesterday, the Senate Office of Oversight and Outcomes released a report which I commissioned that found that in round-the-clock state operations, prisons, and state developmental centers, furloughs create future fiscal liability because the people being furloughed are actually working. And though they're not being paid, they are owed the money. So furlough and future liability for the state of California. People ask me all the time when this subject arises, okay, Senator, you don't like the 3 furlough days? What would you do to replace the revenue that is allegedly being gained as a result of the 3 furlough days? And rather than wait for one of these fine reporters to ask me that question, I'm going to answer it right up front. There's a lot of discussion in California now about reform, about the 2/3 vote, about the inability, because of the 2/3 vote, to find the right balance between necessary cuts and additional revenues in these difficult economic times. This issue brings that dysfunction home because look what was left on the table during the $62 billion budget deficit reduction negotiations through February and July of 2009. Democrats urged that we adopt a policy that takes a mere 3% of already owed tax liability from independent contractors to deal with the underground economy, estimated that it would generate $1.9 billion in state revenue on a one-time basis and over $300 million on an annual basis. That could have wiped out the furloughs for 1 year and reduced at least one of the three on an ongoing basis. Look at the issue of revenue in general. While everyone must sacrifice, is it really a fair policy to say that hardworking public servants should have 3 furlough days? You'll hear about what's happening to families here and what's happening to our economy. And finally, the state agencies and state government must take a hit. We get it. But instead of 3 furlough days, making the workers pay for virtually every penny of the cutbacks to state government, how about 1 day's worth of, or 2 days' worth of an unallocated cut to the departments so that they could find other ways, whether it be contracting, whether it be efficiencies, whether it be other ways of saving money instead of 100% of the burden falling on working families. Let me introduce Ken Jacobs, who is the chair of the UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education and the lead study author of the report you're about to hear. Thank you. Ken?
Thank you, Senator. 3 furlough days a month is the equivalent of a 13.8% reduction in salary. For a worker, that's over 7 weeks of pay. That is a significant hardship for those workers. The senator has already eloquently spoken about the impact of the furloughs on Sacramento County, where you have a large share of the workers, and you have a multiplier effect in the economy of spending reduction, money that's not being spent in the local economy that leads to private sector job loss. The budget crisis is real. The question we wanted to look at was, what are the savings of the furlough program as they're actually being done? We started with data from the Comptroller's office that looked at how have actual salary payments changed with the furloughs February through June and then in July. So this is based on actual data. We come up with an estimation that the furloughs overall will reduce payments on salary and benefits for a little over $2 billion, $2.01 billion in wages and benefits for fiscal year 09-10. Of that money, 57.7% is general fund money. The furloughs also include people who are paid out of federal dollars and people who are in self-supporting special funds. When we cut back on people, do furloughs on people paid out of federal dollars, that's a dual loss for the state. That's both a loss of revenue into the state from the federal government, and then many of those workers are doing work that qualify California residents for federal funding. When that work is cut back, that's also federal dollars we lose to the state and we lose to our state's economy. So once we factor in, well, what part of this little over $2 billion is in general fund, that's 1.16, we estimate it at $1.16 billion. Now, the Franchise Tax Board and the Board of Equalization have each come out with studies looking at what are the impacts of the furloughs in the case of the Franchise Tax Board and the cutback of the similar amount to the Board of Equalization on their ability to collect revenue. Together, they estimate a $675 million loss of revenue, of which $363 million is in 2009-2010. Finally, as we have this cutback in wages and in salary, the way the retirement funds are paid for in California is on a percentage of salary. So for full-time year-round workers, they will continue to collect the same retirement benefits, but the money is not being put aside by the state for their retirement. In effect, the state is borrowing against CalPERS and the retirement fund. So that's $299 million that will need to be repaid back, and it happens through an automatic adjustment in the payroll rate that's paid into retirement. Now, they don't just have to make up that money. Of that, $173 million is general fund. They also have to make up the losses in revenue that would have been earned on that money over the years to retirement. Once we add all of this together, The savings to the general fund for this fiscal year falls to $738 million out of the $2 billion that was cut. And there's a loss of $503 million in the upcoming years. So the total net savings falls to just $236 million. Because if on a one furlough day a month, mandatory one furlough day a month, the losses in the revenue generating departments is so much lower, the actual net losses long-term from one furlough day a month are lower. I mean, the net savings from one furlough day a month are actually slightly greater than the net savings of 3 furlough days a month when we look out into the longer run costs. The special funds, the cuts to the special funds are also not costless. Not only do they not generate the savings for the general fund, but they also have other attendant costs on the California economy and on Californians. There's an impact, disruption of public services. The Department of Motor Vehicles has reported longer waiting periods. We have disruption in terms of road repair at accident times. We've heard stories of delays in business licenses, in medical licenses. All of those have impacts on California and on the California economy. So if the goal of the furlough program is savings to the general fund, I think our conclusion is quite clear that this program is poorly designed. Thank you.
It's important you not only hear the numbers, but it's important you hear from the people who this policy directly affects. So I want to ask Clayton Brown, a Caltrans equipment operator, to come forward and tell his story.
Hi, my name is Clay Brown. I worked for Caltrans for 10 years. I started May of 2000. My salary was $32.50 a month. I paid $1.17 a month for health insurance for myself, my wife, and my child. Now my salary is $86 more a month than when I started. Health insurance is $380 a month. Last summer, I had to go get my child from San Luis Obispo and move her home. She was attending college there, but I had to tell her that no more. So she's sitting at home, nothing to do, no money. Hardest thing I ever did in my life. With the furloughs, we can't go out anywhere. I used to play golf on Fridays, Saturdays or Sundays. I can't do that. My wife could get her hair done. She can't do that. Right now, we can barely afford to put gas in our cars to go to work. She's been cut. She's a paramedic EMT1. She's also a registered dental assistant. And between her cut, my cut, we're about $1,300 a month. And I talked to my mortgage company. They wanted to foreclose on me. And they're out of Texas, and the Texans helped me. They lowered my mortgage rate, my mortgage payment per month. So therefore, I got to keep the house that I've lived in since 1978. 31 years in the same house, and then all of a sudden, 3 furlough days, and our economy just sucks the life right out of you. I've never spoken in front of anybody before. I'm pretty nervous, and so I'm probably forgetting what other things I want to say. But my job consists of, I work on 99 in the San Joaquin Valley, and it's very dangerous. I'm on the fog line quite often with traffic at 85 miles an hour. I've watched people die in front of me, kids, first responder, which were considered not. But in the 10 years I've been there, I've seen probably 8 people die in front of me. I've seen explosions. I've protected the drains from diesel spills going down the roads. This situation with the furloughs, just on my crew alone and the economy, we're 5 people short, operators and workers to keep the highway infrastructure going. Our roads are terrible, our shoulders are terrible. We have nobody to work. One person takes off, nothing gets done. The stress this causes between myself and my spouse is unbelievable. And I guarantee it goes through everybody that works with me through Caltrans, every family. And not only that, nobody wants to come to work. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody wants to work overtime because you're not getting paid for overtime. You're getting straight time for overtime, and then you're getting taxed for overtime. So nothing's right now. It's terrible. And I would imagine a lot of families that are in the same position I am, have got cars repossessed, are pulling their kids out of college. And on that, I want to read something my coworker wanted me to read. To whom it may concern, we are writing this letter because we are told our governor has told a Superior Court judge that the furlough days we are forced to take are not causing financial hardship for state employees. That's a bold-faced lie. With my 3 furlough days and my wife's cut this year, we are struggling to pay our bills. My furlough days are way higher than her cut in pay. We have cut back on going out to dinner, which would stimulate our local economy. We have cut back on entertainment we used to do, movies, motorcycle riding, etc. Again, this would be our this would stimulate our local economy and any other if we could afford to do this. I can say we are making our house payment as we do not want to leave the place we have been in for 15 years. We have closed accounts that we have had a long time in doing business with no late fees, late payments, and to lower the rates. We are doing all we can do to assure our financial credit stays excellent. Our family stays together and we can pay our bills. My wife and I fight every night over money, and why don't I ever have any in my pocket? She thinks I am pointing the finger at her when I'm not. She just is one taking the complaints. We actually have a budget and stick to it. We have almost gotten a divorce over this. I have to see my doctor because my blood pressure is so high, and I am unhappy, and I lash out at my wife and son every day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for sharing your story. I now want to invite to the podium Michael Keholanui, the owner of the Texas Mexican Restaurant and Griselda's Catering here to talk about the impact of 3 furlough days on a downtown business. Please.
Thank you, Senator. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Mike Keholanui. My wife and I, Griselda, have owned a Texas Mexican Restaurant for almost 20 years, and we also own Griselda's Catering, which is one of the few union caterers here in Sacramento, operating here in the state capitol building. But, from our perspective as being small business owners and also being advocates for small business, as you guys all know, Fridays have become not where you want to go to eat on Fridays, but what place is open on Fridays. And the struggle to maintain a business when you take 3 of our busiest days away from us is you can't do it. My personal perspective is, this decision to do furloughs here in Sacramento is probably the most responsible decision I've ever seen. And I don't think anyone really thought through on the consequences here in Sacramento of what this would do to our local economy. The current administration is the governor. I'll hold those comments to myself, but I'm really happy that we have responsible elected officials like Senator Steinberg that are looking out for us. And again, trying to maintain a business, a restaurant business here in Sacramento where we've seen our sales go down 30% is hard. And I think all of you are pretty much aware that here in Sacramento we live off state workers. and there are no state workers working. So we would like to see this decision reversed and hopefully still be in business when that happens so we can continue to do business here in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Finally, Patrick Wurzing, who's a compliance officer with the Northern California electrical construction industry. Please come to the podium.
My name is Pat Wurzing. As he said, I'm a compliance officer for the Northern California electrical construction industry. My experience, I was a deputy labor commissioner for 6 years for the state of California, specifically public work prevailing rate. Prior to that, I was a deputy sheriff for Sacramento County for 20 years. My background is law enforcement. I know that the governor has said that law enforcement's not affected, and that's a lie. The California State Licensing Board is an enforcement entity. They have investigators throughout the state. They've lost 80 investigators. They are responsible for the licensing of construction companies to make sure that when you hire an electrician, that he has the training and the ability to do the job. Also, CSLB and Chief Voigt has done a tremendous job on the forefront of workers' compensation fraud. To be licensed, you have to have workers' comp, and they are vigilant about doing that. Well, now they've been cut 36 days a year. That's insane, okay? It's made them a part-time investigative unit. Your best investigators, your top guys with experience are looking for someplace else to go because they can't afford to be part-time investigators. The Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, which I turn my cases over to, okay, they have 120 cases on their desk right now, each investigator within the Public Works unit. The statute of limitations is 180 days on those cases. It takes you 3 weeks to do one case. These investigators do their own audits, they handle their own evidence, they go to courts, they go to hearings, and just do the math, okay? One of those, like 80% of those 120 cases are going to go down the toilet because of statute of limitations. And the bad contractors, the thieves, the people who are stealing work from honest contractors, they know this. And we are flooded, okay? I handle cases for hundreds of thousands of dollars where benefits haven't been paid. Benefits are very important to the local economy. If you bring a worker in, and that worker is going to be there for 18 months, he or his family are going to use medical facilities for something. And they immediately, if they don't get that prevailing rate, they don't get that public benefit, they go to the local hospital for free. And it happens, you can go to any county, and they'll tell you about it. How important is workers' compensation enforcement within the construction industry? When a construction worker is injured, it's often a serious injury. Sometimes they're out of work forever. And it's so important. It's scary that anybody would ever think, gee, let's cut back. Let's cut these people by 13%. It's enforcement. I'm telling you one thing for sure. The bad guys aren't taking a furlough day off, okay? The criminal element that steals hundreds of millions of dollars in the underground economy doesn't have a furlough day. The governor, in his infinite wisdom, did not extend that 180 days by 36 days. So I've lost cases. In other words, my contractors have paid me to investigate cases, to follow up, to interview the workers, to do the audit. I've brought those cases, but I've lost them because of that statute of limitations. So it's cost industry, who's trying to do their own enforcement, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The second part of that is now the construction industry, to defend themselves, is going to lawsuits themselves. They're going to pay their own attorneys to try to civilly sue to protect their work. And that's just not fair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you get a feel and a sense for the simple fact that as California deals with a historic economic crisis, and as we are forced to make the most difficult of decisions, there is in fact a huge cost to cutting. There is an impact on human beings and their families. There is a direct impact on our economy because if people have less to spend, it's that much more difficult to generate economic activity and the sales tax and the other taxes that we need in order to recover. And it also makes it very, very difficult for the people to expect the high level of public services that many of the people behind me represent here today. There are other choices here in California. They just aren't doable under our current structure with one arm tied behind our backs. Is this result a better result than a modest oil severance tax? Is this result a better result than taking a closer look and eliminating those tax breaks that don't actually create jobs? Thank you. Happy to stand for questions.
So, Senator, the state budget assumes the savings of these 3 furlough days for the year. So how would you make that happen this year, make those savings happen this year, if not these furloughs?
Well, again, there are a number of other options. Number one, we can replace 1 or 2 days of these furloughs with an unallocated cut to the state agencies and not take the savings out 100% on the working people. Secondly, we can continue to push and work to convince our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and the governor to replace 1 or 2 days of these furloughs with an oil severance tax, with eliminating 1 or 2 of the tax loopholes, with more aggressive withholding for independent contractors. See, it's not impossible. It's just a matter of will, and it's a matter of articulating priorities here and saying that while it's fair that even state workers have to be part of this solution, and in fact have shown a willingness to by negotiating a contract where they voluntarily agreed to a furlough day, the 3 days is just too much.
Does the Center for Labor Research and Education get some money from unions like the CIU or AFL-CIO, any of those?
We have a diverse set of sources of funding in terms of the center. We receive funding from the state, from the university, and we do have donations from unions, as well as we've done work with businesses.
Don't you think that kind of slants your study? Of course you're going to do a favorable study.
Look at the numbers. What we did is, this is not a favorable or unfavorable study. We took the numbers from the controller's office. This is what they're actually saving. We looked at the numbers from the Franchise Tax Board on their projection of out-year costs, and we took the numbers directly from CalPERS on their estimates of what's happening in terms of losses to that fund. So there's nothing here to balance either way. This is all pretty straightforward math.
I don't know how UC Berkeley Table of Organization. Are you a faculty member?
I am not a faculty member. I am the chair of the Center for Labor Research and Education. So the center is part of an organized research unit, the Institute for Research on Labor and Employment, which is run by a faculty member.
Okay. Are you a union member?
I am a union member, as are many other people. Yes. I'm a member of UC-AFT.
California has a 25% higher unemployment rate than the national average. How much of this cutback in government spending, because we're talking about economic depression here, okay, how much of this loss of economic activities, that 25% differential, can you attribute to this cutback in government spending?
I think that's a very good question. It's hard to put an exact number on that, but there's no question that the cutback in government spending overall in the state can be expected to prolong the recession and delay any return to growth in economic activity. Taking that size of funds out of our economy in terms of the cutbacks on the budget is going to have does have a strong economic impact and will delay recovery. There's no question.
Reasons I think people are concerned about your organization. Certainly, Senator Steinberg is ably advocating for some of his constituents here, but this has sort of become a partisan situation here where you're standing up with them, you're standing up with workers. Can you talk about some of the, was this sought by the senator's office? Is this, how did this whole thing come together as far as with your organization working with the senator here?
Well, we were, given that UC is also having furloughs and all, we have been since the budget crisis started, we've been, and the cutbacks, I mean, we started looking more broadly at this question of what are the impacts of the California budget on jobs in the state, the very questions we were just answering. And so that became an important question for us, since our mission is to do applied research to look at the economy of the state. In this case, we were very interested, again, in looking at this question of the furloughs, since it's a large amount of money in terms of the impact. How does that play out on the state, on the economy, and is it in the end saving the money that it would save? Now, we started doing this research. We started making calls around to people we were interested. We made calls around to people in the Capitol, and so they hooked up with us and asked if we'd come and present it.
So they didn't ask you to do it, though? Was there any connection before as the study was being formulated?
No, we'd sent them a copy of the study as we were doing it, and we were calling people here for questions. That's how they discovered that we were doing the work. So it wasn't commissioned by the senator's office.
You know, can I?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say my bias is very clear. I think 3 days of furlough is too much. And I think the report simply is another piece of evidence that show that 3 days is too much. The other report that we've talked about here this morning, the report that shows how the state's not really saving money by imposing the furloughs on 24-hour institutions like prisons and developmental hospitals, was commissioned by my office because I wanted to know whether or not the savings were real. So yes, I'm very clear in my opinion on this subject. I think 3 days is far too much.
So why not just release an independent?
I'm sorry?
What is the next step? What would you do next? Because we have been seeing this kind of results, and I think we have another report some days ago. So what is your plan of action?
My plan of action is as soon as, first of all, as soon as there is the beginning of recovery, to seek to change 1 or 2 of these furlough days, to eliminate 1 or 2 of these furlough days. 2, to continue pressing the case, that there are alternatives to this kind of dramatic impact on working families. And 3, to support the workers who currently have their cases on the legality of these furloughs pending in court.
Besides tax increases, do you have any other ideas on how to stimulate the economy to at least get us back up to the national unemployment average? I'm thinking you bring more tax revenue in, you just obviate the need for all this.
Well, sure. And yes, I mean, if you look at the difficult and controversial decision we made last night, for example, on the floor of the state Senate, in which we essentially approved the potential for a major development project in Southern California around sports and entertainment, creates 18,000 jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of economic activity. We need to do a whole lot more of that sort of job creation without sacrificing CEQA and without sacrificing our environmental laws in California. We're also working very hard and well with the governor as we speak here to put together a historic water agreement, which will not only be good and important for California's future water needs, but will also be a generator of thousands of high-wage jobs, especially in the construction industry. So there's no question that we need to be about job creation. But you know what? One of the ironies here is that public employment is one of the last bastions of middle-class employment in this state. And so rather than bring people down. We ought to be working to lift all people up. And the point here is that if we continue to lose middle-class workers, then it not only harms them and their families, but it also has a significant impact on our ability to recover economically. Thank you all very much. We're going to